Zapier, Make.com, or n8n. I've run into a couple of comparison videos lately, and I kind of felt like none of the creators who made videos about this are really helping the end user to make a practical choice, if you will, because they are going through of how many applications the certain connector has integration with or how much it costs, etc. But generally the video ends with, it depends on your specific use case. Well, thank you. That's not really helpful, right? Let me use a more practical approach. I use all three platforms, and all three platforms are good for different purposes. And the short answer to which one to choose is to choose all of them. Even if you are a business owner who would like to build a couple of automations for themselves, or you are a systems integrator or a no-code or low-code AI developer or something like that, you will probably need all three. So why don't just open accounts for all three? If you are taking a look at General Motors, they are probably not sourcing the steel for the cars from one certain place. They are sourcing from many of them, because if one of them falls out, then you can use the other one. Or if one of the suppliers are able to make certain parts or certain material cheaper than others, then you just choose that one, right? So you should always have a full toolbox of which one to use. And I've prepped a very, very simple Miro board of how to approach this and how you can kind of compare them, and what are the small feature advantages that you will use at one of them, and then other feature advantages with the other one, right? I broke it down very, very simply. So price is going to be a big factor, and generally Zapier is the most expensive. Probably if you watch this video, you already know by this point. And since Make.com's minimum operation count is 10,000 operations, I just took it as a reference. It's approximately like $10 to $12 or something like that. Don't quote me on that one, but it's approximately $10. And the same 10K is on Zapier is $193.5 or something like that. And n8n is a little bit more tricky comparing to the rest of them, because Zapier and Make.com charges per operation. So for example, if you are having a incoming webhook and then you want to send a Slack message and then you want to make an update on Go High Level, then these are two operations. And n8n charges on a workflow basis. So for example, if you have the same workflow, you would only have one workflow cost in n8n, while in Zapier and Make.com you had two operations cost. So this is making the whole comparison a little bit tricky, because if you have more complex workflows, 10,000 workflow will last much longer than in Zapier or Make.com. But let's say you are building simple workflows to make it kind of simpler to compare. And if you are building more complex workflows, you are a little bit just inflate or adjust to that. So for example, with n8n, if you have 2.5K workflows with unlimited steps, if you have 4 steps in each and every workflow, then basically it's more comparable to use like a 24 euro plan, which is approximately like $28 at the moment or something. In that case, it's like $28 or $25 or $30 compared to 10 or 193. From a pricing perspective, Make.com and n8n is much closer to each other. And you would say there is not much big of a difference, right, between the two. Like even if you have 10,000 operations, which is a pretty large number, then you still pay $10 or $28 or $50. It's not a big cost in a business. But when we are talking about Zapier, Zapier is kind of like an outlier, which costs like sometimes like 20 times, 10 times, 5 times, like it costs a lot more than the other two platforms. The very first approach that I would say is that if you don't have that much automations or you have simple automations, then you can select either Zapier or Make.com. I think those two should be the baseline approach, and n8n is good in specific use cases, which I'm going to talk about later. But let's say n8n is a little bit of a advanced stuff that you don't need to use you don't need to build in n8n a lot of times. Like Make and Zapier is perfectly enough. Even if you are a business owner with simple automations or you are a more advanced user, I would definitely recommend to have both a Zapier and Make.com account. It's free to open them. It's free for up to 1,000 operations in Make, 100 operations or zaps, let's say, in Zapier. It's completely free. So why not have both? And let me go into why I would prefer one over the other. So even though Zapier is really expensive, it does have a couple of advantages. Super easy to use, and it has a function within it when the Zap is running on an error. it's very easy to replay. I'm going with a very simple example. So for example, if you are having an onboarding workflow and you are onboarding five new clients, and there's some sort of input error with the third client, the first two and the last two still gets onboarded and it runs through. And Zapier is going to just save the zap as a stopped scenario, or stop zap, basically, that you can replay. You can see the replay button here, and it's very easy. And the whole zap is not going to stop. It is going to just save and put it aside that, hey, this actual zap haven't run because there was some sort of error. So you can go like a one by one basis and kind of analyze what is the problem with that certain zap that's supposed to run. While it's a little bit different in make.com, because at every single step, you need to use a so-called error handler. And there are multiple options, like should you ignore the error, should you try to replay, or like what you should do. And it makes the setup a little bit more complicated. And if you don't set up an error handler, then the whole scenario, which is kind of like the zap in Zapier, is going to stop. You get an error message, but if there are like 5 to 6 other people would have been onboarded during that time, by the time you notice that the scenario stopped, then the rest of the people doesn't get onboarded either. And so in an onboarding workflow, when new clients are coming, it might not be that frequent, right? Like if you are sleeping at night and then you wake up in the morning and you see at night, your scenario stopped, then maybe you don't even get another client who needs onboarding. But if you are building like AI workflows where the workflow is talking to ChatGPT, and then you are using that for a chatbot, for example, or an AI voice caller, it's very, very important that the workflow is not stopping, because it would stop in mid conversation, and then even the next caller could not use that certain scenario because the whole scenario is stopped. So this is a huge advantage on Zapier, that it's very easy to set up. You basically don't have to do anything, and it kind of separates every single person in a small bucket, and then you can handle them much easier. In some cases, it's worth the cost, and I would definitely recommend, if you have like a low frequency use case, for example, an onboarding workflow, then you might want to use Zapier over make.com. And if you don't use premium workflows, then it might be even free for you, because you might just use like, for example, 10 zaps per onboarding. And then if you are onboarding 10 clients, you use the 100 zap and you are still in the free zone, right? So you might be fine with using one single zap with about 5 to 10 steps, and you are still on the free plan, and it's much more reliable. So I would definitely consider to use Zapier over make.com in a low frequency scenarios when you are not that tech savvy and you don't want to go into that whole error handling craziness in make.com. This might be an advantage. Or the other big advantage of Zapier is that it has much more app integrations with other applications. And for example, if you are using a specific app that you don't find in make.com, it might be a lot more complex to do a whole custom webhook link with make.com and that certain application. And maybe it's not really worth your time, because it's a low frequency, for example, onboarding, or it just happens a couple of times a month. And you are going into like custom webhooks and then trying to find like how to do that on the platform. It might just steal so much time from you, rather than just making it very, very quickly in Zapier. And it's not happening frequently anyway, so you don't pay that much, right? So in these kind of scenarios, I would consider to use Zapier, or you can even use the mix of the two. For example, if it has an integration with a certain app, then you just have that incoming webhook, and then you basically send it over to make.com. And then if you have like 10, 15 steps after that, you are paying much less, but you didn't have to deal with like the custom integration with Make if that specific app doesn't have a connection between Make and the app itself, right? But you just simply use the Zapier one, you are sending that over to make.com, and then you are good to go. So I've had a couple of examples in my experience when I had to use both in a hybrid. It's a very rare use case, and I recommend to avoid that because it just gets complicated. But I think it really makes sense to use both. So one advantage of Zapier is the replay automation. that it's kind of like default. The Zap never stops. It just kind of saves the errored Zaps to the side, which is really nice. And then it has a lot more integration, so you can use a lot more triggers. And if you have a specific use case, then it might make sense to use Zapier. However, the majority of the automations for myself as well and for my clients are happening in make.com because it's way cheaper. Like having 10K for $10, you just can't really justify the cost of paying 10 times more than in make.com, right? So it's much, much better to use make.com in most of the cases. And as I said, in a couple of examples, you can use Zapier. You might be able to use Zapier in the free plan, but if you don't, then you just pay for $30 for 750 Zaps, and that will last for a very long time. And then like the heavy, high frequency automations that can happen in make.com because it's still super, super cheap. And then obviously, if you have a lot of operations, the price difference worth it to kind of learn the bigger learning curve or use those error handlings and etc. At the same time, for advanced people, since it's more customizable, we tend to like make.com even more than Zapier because it gives you more flexibility to build stuff, but it can also break easier. So that's kind of something to bear in mind. But in any case, I would definitely recommend to have make.com as the absolute go-to. And Zapier is kind of like a partner in crime next to it when it makes sense, just for like lower frequency tasks and specific integrations. If you don't want to deal with the error handling, just like use that replay function that Zapier has, then definitely I would recommend to use Zapier next to make.com, right? So Make is kind of like the king of connectors, and then Zapier is good in certain use cases. And now the little small outlier, which is not that little because n8n is getting crazy lately, especially because of the AI no-code, low-code revolution that is happening. n8n, I would not necessarily subscribe because of price. So, if you don't have any AI applications just yet, or you are not using any custom coding or something like that, then you can even skip the video, go with make.com and Zapier, and you are good. n8n is really for AI workflows, custom coding, and if you have extremely high operation count within a certain workflow. I mean, this kind of makes sense already because, for example, if you have like a 30-step long workflow, then you might want to use n8n even over make.com. The price difference is just going to be so small that I'm not sure that it makes sense to like learn a brand new platform. But it might be, I don't know, if you have like 100 operations, which I don't think anyone has. But for example, you pay one single operations for all of the 100 steps if it runs through, because on n8n, you are paying for workflow, not for operations. I don't think many people or many use cases have more than, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 steps. So it's a really, really rare use case, I believe. And the other two advantages is the AI workflow and custom coding. You can see that n8n has a lot of built-in tools like AI agent, and so you can use a different chat model, memory, and certain tools. So I think n8n has a huge advantage for people who are developing AI agents, AI workflows. So if you are one of those guys, then obviously n8n is a must-open platform for you. But if you're a business owner, if you are outsourcing this kind of function and you don't want to deal with this, then you might not need n8n. Just a side note, a lot of AI automations can be done in make.com. It's a little bit more simpler, easier to learn than n8n. n8n has much more customizability in the AI agent front, so you should bear that in mind. And the other advantage is custom coding. So let me expand on this one. Whenever there is like a complex flow that I need to run, I needed to run in the past, I generally just use the webhook. I made like a small microservice somewhere where I paid someone to make it. And basically, my webhook just talked to that microservice, sent the input, and then got the output back. And then I kind of used that in the workflow. If I needed to use like more complex math situation, or I had to pull data from different places or such, then I kind of just developed like an outside tool. And now you are able to kind of bring that inside, that coding part, that low code part, to to n8n, and then make your either JavaScript or Python code here, kind of run that within n8n. So that's a big one. Honestly, I have never used this, and Zapier also has this function. You can run a JavaScript or you can run a Python. So if I think it's a very rare use case that you need to use this, but if you do, please let me know in the comments, or if you have experience with Zapier, or I mean, if Zapier can do it, probably Make can do it as well. But I've heard from people in a few use cases that they liked using it within n8n. So if you are one of those guys who have vast experience in it, let me know in the comments. Leave your 2 cents, because really I think it's a rare use case that most of the businesses face with these kind of issues. One last point that n8n has that the other 2 platforms truly doesn't, is that you can run n8n on your own server, which is very exciting, because you can basically install n8n on your very own server, and you don't have to rely on the servers of oops, it's a different topic. So you really don't have to rely on the servers of Zapier or Make.com. I mean, most of the users will be okay to use the centralized entity and don't take the responsibility of running their own servers. But maybe you handle data, or you really want to be matrix proof, where you want to have your own server, but then you take on the responsibility of running the whole backend infrastructure of running n8n and make the automations on n8n. So if you have that use case, you probably don't watch this video because you are super advanced on n8n by now. But it's good for you to know that at any point your n8n account can be run on your very own server, and you can be more matrix proof than on the other 2 platforms. So that's really it. It's a very easy comparison, and let me make it even easier for you. Open up a Make account and try to do everything in Make that you can. And if you run into something and it's simple and it's more like an integration issue, or you would like to use the auto replay function or the replay function of Zapier, then open up a Zapier account next to Make if you can do something in Make. And then if you are doing AI workflows, custom coding, and you have a super high operation count within the workflows, then open up an n8n next to Make. But I think Make is really still the king of connectors that you are using. Also note that on the n8n side, on the workflows, that the pricing plans are interesting, because you can only use 5 on the starter and 15 active workflows on the Pro. I have a lot of use cases where it's just a one-step workflow that if something happens, then there is a Slack notification going into a channel, or a Telegram notification for some of my clients. And then they might even have like 200 separate scenarios or zaps, but they are rarely used, and they are like smaller ones. So yeah, you need to have like just a few workflows, but they are like super high amount of operations inside. That's when n8n can really like flip Make. But still, I believe Make is kind of like Make.com is kind of like the go-to tool, and then next to it Zapier. And if you have these kind of use cases, then n8n is the partner of Make. I hope it gave more clarity, and I hope it's going to be easier to decide. Use all 3, be like General Motors, and have multiple suppliers, and use each and one of those suppliers to the use cases that they fit the most. If you would like to have someone that would consult you, or you would want to completely outsource this because you don't want to deal with this, you are going to find a booking link in the description. Feel free to book a call with me, bring on your use case, let's talk about it, and potentially let's working together on your automations and systems. I'm looking forward to talk to you, and as always, see you in the next one.